I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, to me, and I believe.
Okay, thank you. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Can I share my screen, Prabhu? I would like to. Okay.
Feel free, Prabhu.
Okay, so I got it. So thank you very much for the opportunity today to be of service to you. And this is a very exalted topic to discuss. This is a discussion on Lord Chaitanya's conversation with Ramananda Rai. So we'll be focusing, because it's a very vast topic, and we will focus on some aspects of that discussion. This and analyze this in broadly 4 parts: the context, the content, the consequence, and the relevance. So the content itself can go into several classes, but we will discuss some aspects of the content. Now, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are described primarily in the Chaitanya-Charitamrita and in several other biographies also. The Chaitanya-Charitamrita, among the various biographies, has a distinctive style. That is, that it describes events, but wherever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has philosophical conversations, it zooms in over there and elaborates them. In that sense, when we say read the Bhagavatam, sometimes we may see long prayers by certain characters. And it's a dramatic pastime going on, and suddenly there are long prayers. And we may just skip the prayers and go ahead. The prayers are very illuminating, but sometimes in the context of the drama, they may, dramatic action that is happening, we may say, oh, I just want to go ahead and know what happened. So there is dramatic action, which naturally attracts our attention. But Chaitanya Charitamrita is not in that sense like a crowd-pleasing book. It is beautiful poetry, no doubt. But although it is beautiful poetry, that doesn't mean that it focuses on pleasing the crowd. The Chaitanya Charitamrita is more like a book of theology in the format of a biography. So it has a biographical format, not entirely, but the first 7 chapters are elaborate philosophy, their theology more specifically. Philosophy is more about the nature of reality. Theology is more about the nature of God. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita is more about theology. But the more significant thing for us is that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami focuses on conversations. He describes events, dramatic events, he describes beautifully, but he focuses on conversations. There's one reason for it, many, but one reason was Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami wanted to establish through his book the intellectual, philosophical, and spiritual authority of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And that's why there are elaborate chapters on not just the incidents, but the philosophy. And one such elaborate chapter comes in the Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That is the discussion between Ramananda Rai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And among various philosophical conversations that Lord Chaitanya has with various people, this, in one sense, is unique. There are 5 major conversations Lord Chaitanya has with various characters. So his conversations, we can say, they're at a degree, a hierarchy. His conversations with, say, with Prakashanand Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they are primarily to transform. They are, both of them are having an impersonal conception of life. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks deep philosophy to transform their hearts. So they are more for the purpose of transformation. Then there are the conversations. He has another set of conversations with Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They are also very deep. They are more for the purpose of instruction. Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis have already accepted him as a great authority. For Prakashanand Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they respect him as sannyasi, but they not accepted him as the authority per se. So his speech is to transform them to accept not just his authority, but the authority of bhakti. With Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, it's more for instruction. And with Ramananda Rai, it's different in 2 ways. It's not, because it's not a vertical that he's transforming or instructing someone. They're simply reciprocating. It's a discussion. And not only is it a discussion, the flow of the discussion is significantly the other way. In most other conversations, it's Lord Chaitanya who is speaking and the others are hearing. Although, of course, with respect to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Lord Chaitanya hears from him for 7 days. But what he speaks there, what he hears is not described in the Chaitanya-Charitamrita. And that is not considered primarily the part of the conversation. But here Ramananda Rai speaks. And here there's a very important lesson which we'll come to later. That, but in the context, this is a very distinctive conversation that where Lord Chaitanya hears, and moreover, the point is not just the discussion. It's simply a discussion for appreciation and relishing, for appreciating and relishing. So there is it's not so much instruction, but it's just, you could almost say that when 2 equals meet each other, they're just relishing the discussion. What Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, bodhayantaha parasparam. Bodhayantaha parasparam. Tushyanti charamanti, they relish it. So in one sense, this discussion is the model for all of us, how we can connect with and reciprocate with devotees. I'll come to that, to the conclusion, but this is the context. Let's look a little bit more at the context. Listen. So let's understand Ramananda Rai's background. He will now, who is so worthy for having a conversation with the Lord as an equal? So Ramananda Rai would, by most standards, be considered an unlikely candidate for this. Why an unlikely candidate? Because at that time, the society in India was quite caste conscious. In fact, far more caste conscious than Krishna conscious. And yet, what happens over there is, so Ramananda Rai was born in the Karanam caste, which is similar to the Kayasthas, and they were not considered to be the highest of castes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born in a Brahmana family, and the Brahmanas were quite proud of their high birth at that time. Now, this was not a desirable thing. It was considered deviation. And some things in scripture are prescriptive about what we should do, and some things are descriptive. This was how things were at that time. The descriptive part is not necessarily prescriptive. That there was a caste system that is described in there's caste consciousness that is described in Chaitanya-Charitamrita. That Haridas Thakur was not allowed in the Jagannath Puri temple. That's described there. That is a descriptive part. That's not a prescriptive part. So everything in scripture is not necessarily the teaching of scripture. Sometimes scripture may just be describing the socio-cultural reality at a particular time. But the point is, Within that socio-cultural reality, the unlikeliness of this conversation is highlighted. So he was born in a little lower caste, and Bhavananda Rai was his father. He had 5 sons. Among him, Ramanand was the eldest. They're both born in Orissa. Lord Chaitanya, as you know, appeared in Bengal, but he resided in Orissa at Jagannath Puri. And after arriving at Jagannath Puri and transforming Sarvam Bhattacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the South India tour. At that time, Sarvam Bhattacharya told him that, Kabur, you will find a very exalted Vaishnava, Ramananda Rai. Earlier, I did not value him, but now I understand how great he is. You associate with him, it will be very satisfying for you. If you consider his lineage from the perspective of not just material but spiritual perspective, it described that he is a disciple of Raghavendra Puri, who was an important associate of Lord Chaitanya, and he was a grand disciple of Madhavendra Puri. Now that brings him, in one sense, in terms of initiation, he is at the same level of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya himself is a grand disciple of Madhavendra Puri through Ishwara Puri. So we have Raghavendra Puri, through Ishwara Puri there is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Madhavendra Puri through Raghavendra Puri is Ramananda Rai. So both of them are in that sense equal. However, if we consider further, when they met each other, when they saw each other, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a sannyasi and Ramananda Rai was the in some ways the governor, whatever be the functionary, the English translation often is governor, but he was the administrative head of that place, of not just Kabur, but the whole area over there. And he was naturally accompanied by Brahmanas as he was going for bathing. At that time, even if the Brahmanas were not very pure, not very spiritual, the Brahmanas would be kept by the kings and the heads of state, so that around them, so that they would have some appearance of piety, and they would look good in a religious society. That, oh, we maintain Brahmanas, we're surrounded by Brahmanas, we discuss with Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas would sometimes spend time with the heads of state because the Brahmanas also needed sponsors, they needed maintenance. So these Brahmanas were not particularly spiritually evolved, but they were religious, they were pious. So they were going with Ramananda Rai when he was going to take a bath. And Ramananda Rai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw each other and they rushed toward each other and they embraced each other for a very long time. Now, from the socio-political, socio-economic perspective, Ramananda Rai was the head of the state over there. And Lord Chaitanya was a sannyasi. Normally, sannyasis are respected, and they were, at least at that time, respected much more, 500 years ago. But still, Lord Chaitanya was an unknown sannyasi. Even among sannyasis, there are some sannyasis who are very well known, and Lord Chaitanya at that time was quite unknown. So the Brahmanas were bewildered. Why is this? Why is this our head of state going and embracing a sannyasi? Normally, if sannyasi is there, you offer some respects from a distance, be reverential. You don't expect such intimacy as embrace with sannyasi. And then on the other side, they were surprised. Why is the sannyasi embracing a person who is socio hierarchically like a Shudra? The Brahmanas would serve him, Ramananda Rai. They would perform rituals for him, perform sacrifices for him. But they kept their distance. They considered him to be a relatively lower caste person. And here Lord Chaitanya was embracing. So this itself is an this context where both of them, they go beyond convention. This is a pointer to what is going to come in the discussion. So what is going to come is that which transcends normal conceptions and conventions. Conceptions refer to how we think and conventions refer to how we act. So in every society, there are some normal conceptions and normal conventions. Here, the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai is going to go beyond ordinary conceptions and go beyond ordinary conventions. Both. So both of them hugged each other for a long time. And then then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda noticed, they sensed the bewilderment, the puzzlement on the faces of the Brahmanas, and they decided, okay, we have to come to external consciousness. So they separated from each other, and what did they do thereafter? They decided that they will. That they said, we will meet later. I want to discuss with you. Both of them said yes. Ramananda humbly said, I want your association. My mind is not pure. By your association, I'll become purified. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, actually, I am simply a Mayavadi sannyasi. It is only by associating with a Vaishnava like you that I will get some love for Krishna. So both of them again spoke according to external convention. That external convention is a sannyasi is considered pure. So association with the sannyasi will purify a grahastha. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took a humble position. There are many times when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu identifies himself not based on his heart, but based on his affiliation, that I am just a Mayavadi sannyasi. That's because he had taken initiation in a sampradaya, which was Mayavadi. That was the purpose, because that Mayavad was respected at that time. So he talked about that sannyas, but he's the topmost devotee. He's Krishna in the mood of Radharani. But that is just the humility. And then they met that night. So we till now discuss the context. Now, as I mentioned, the content goes to a very high level. But let's look at some aspects of the content. So what they discuss is, what is the ultimate purpose of life? What is it that we all should do in life? So for all of us, we are doing various activities. We may have having our careers, we have our families, we may have our hobbies, we may have our sometimes we have some unhealthy habits. So we do various things, and some people, some things we do wholeheartedly, some things we do half-heartedly. But what is it that will give us the highest results in life? Now, what is it that will be most rewarding? So there is a hierarchy which they discuss, and I will not go into the hierarchy technically, but just let's look at it in a broad sense. So first, Ramananda Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he asked this question, what is one's duty? What should one do to achieve the perfection of life? So in one sense, this is a conversation that has echoes throughout the scriptures. In the Mahabharata, the driving question is, what is dharma? Dharma in that context means, what is the right thing to do? The driving question of the Ramayana is, who is an ideal person and what are the characteristics of an ideal person? And the answer is Ram, and Ram's characters are described. And thereby, the activities of Ram are also considered to be ideal in that sense. The driving question of the Bhagavatam is, what is the duty of a person? What is the best thing for a person who is about to die? So the idea that there are so many options for us to act, and we need to choose, we need to prioritize. We have limited time, we have limited energy, we have limited capacities. So what is it? Where should we invest our time, energy, and capacities? So that is a universal question, not just for within the Vedic canon, but for all of humanity. And here, so the answers are given in some ways. The answers in the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Bhagavatam are similar to what is the answer given in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The difference is Chaitanya Charitamrita goes to a higher and higher and higher level in giving the answer. So that's why you see a pyramid over here. And so the conception of the ultimate purpose of life also is different for different people. So at one level, Ramananda Raya starts and he says, yeah, it is the duty of Varnashram. Society, the Varnashram is a system which is given by the Lord. Varnashram basically refers to the position within society which we have according to our social and spiritual location on the journey of life. And then we do our duty. Such duty ensures that we are gradually purified and the social structure is maintained. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Ihabaya agekao ar. And this is true, but it's external. That he doesn't reject it in the sense of calling it false, But he says this is external, which is significant. So what is it? What is this conversation doing? Again and again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Iha Bahaya. This is external. The idea is that within scripture also there are many different layers. And only those who want to go to the deepest layer can go to the deepest layer. So there are many layers which need to be peeled. So like we had the churning of the ocean that is described. There are many desirable objects that come, but when you keep churning, then we go to the most desirable object that comes. So like some people might just get satisfied with the initial products. So then he says that actually just doing one's duty is not enough. One should do one's duty in a mood of devotion. Yat karoshi dasnasi, yat juhosi dadasi, tat tapasasi konte tat kurushva mad arpanam. Mad arpanam. So he says, yeah, that is good. We should offer our duty, devote. We should permeate our dutifulness with devotion. But this is also external. Speak something more. Then he says, okay, we should renounce our duty and sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. And he says, yes, this is good. Iha bhaya age kaho aar. The Mahaprabhu doesn't reject it. He says it's superficial, it's external. Go deeper. Go deeper. Now we may wonder what's wrong with sarvadharman parityajya? Isn't that very high? We're renouncing our duties. Yes, it is very high, but there are higher knowledges still. So then he talks about Jnana Mishra Bhakti. So one may renounce one's duty for the purpose of surrendering, but one may not have much spiritual realization at that time. So we could say the first two levels are going toward Karma Mishra Bhakti. Then one renounces the world. But after renouncing the world, what next? Just renunciation is not enough. There has to be a higher connection. The Prabhupada says in a lecture that he quotes the Sarvadharman Parityajya verse, 1866 in the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, even the hippies had done Sarvadharman Parityajya. They had given up their duties to their society, to their family, to their nation, to their, you could say, to their career, to even their own bodily hygiene. But he said, I taught them Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. I taught them how to surrender to Krishna. And that is extremely important. So that is a higher level. One may renounce without renunciation without realization. Renunciation without absorption, that is not considered very elevated. So then he says, okay, beyond that one gets spiritual realization. One becomes absorbed in bhakti, understanding that actually Krishna is beyond Brahman. So Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati samah sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. One will attain mad bhaktim labate param. Will attain my devotion. And he says, yes, iha bhaya age kaho aar. So what has happened? One has come from the Brahman conception to the Bhagwan conception. And that's why some taints of the Brahman conception might still be there. That's why it's considered Jnana Mishra Bhakti. And then beyond that, then it talks about Kevala Bhakti, simply absorption in the Lord. Kevala in this context means only, pure, exclusive, nothing else. That means we love the Lord simply because the Lord is so lovable, not because of what He will give us. No, many times people worship God, and we may also pray to Krishna to get something desirable from Him. That is okay, at least we are praying to God. And Krishna says that such people are sukrutina. They are well intentioned, they're good, but they're not the best. The best is to understand that Krishna is Krishna's greatest blessing. Krishna is Krishna's greatest blessing. If Krishna manifests in our hearts, He will enrich our hearts in a way that nothing else can in the world. And that is life's highest perfection. But then he goes further and he says, in Kevala Bhakti, we may love the Lord purely, but the Lord also has many manifestations. The manifestation of Vishnu, of Narayan, of Narasimha, of Ram, of Krishna in Dwarka. And then like that, the hierarchy goes up, and absorption in the divine couple, and specifically the divine couple that is referred to here is as Radha Krishna. Now, why is that considered the highest? Now, that is a big subject, many reasons, but primarily that's because Radha Krishna manifests the most intimate love. The kind of affection between Lakshmi and Narayan, or even Sita and Ram, doesn't come as intimate a level as it comes in the case of Radha and Krishna. So then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very satisfied. From the level of Kevala Bhakti only, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, yes, Iha hai aage kaho aar. He says, yes, this is it, but now go deeper into it. So there are two kinds of going deeper. One is, this is superficial, so go deeper. This is right, but now go deeper into this. Go deeper into this. So there is a going deeper into something which is right also, that we need to go deeper into. So that's how it goes deeper and deeper to discuss very elevated subjects of Radharani's love for the Lord. So this is now this discussion of pure devotion in the mood of the love of Radha and Krishna, and how the devotees love Radha and Krishna. That is the zenith. That is the highest. And why is Radharani's love the highest? Because she's the most selfless. She has, in one sense, no concern for herself. Her concern is only for Krishna's pleasure. And whatever it takes to give Krishna pleasure, she's ready to do that. Now, love is characterized by selflessness. Love, the essence of love is giving. The essence of lust is taking. Sometimes we differentiate lust in terms of sexuality and love in terms of spirituality. That is true, but that may not be very practical in terms of how do we interact, because we have so many different relationships with people. So we could put it other ways, that the essence of love is giving. The essence of lust is taking. So whenever we see someone, how do we know whether now that person may be of the may not normally consider that my relationship with them is tainted with lust, but there could be lust for power, there could be lust for control, lust for exploitation. So if we see someone and the first thought in our mind is, what can this person do for me? That means we are in material consciousness. Our relationship is tainted by lust. But as soon as we see a person, we think, what can I do for this person? That is love. And this love is manifested at the highest level in Radharani, where her whole being is offered for the pleasure of Krishna. And we know this in the past time, where Narad Muni asked for the dust of Krishna's devotee so that Krishna would be relieved from the headache. And Radharani was the foremost among the devotees, gopis, who was ready to do that. And she said that, and Narad Muni said, you'll go to hell if the dust of your feet touches Krishna's head. And Radharani said, yes, I know that. But for me, just the thought that Krishna has headache is hell. I can't bear it. Just go quickly and relieve Krishna of his headache. And if I can relieve Krishna of his headache for even one moment, that's worth going to hell forever also. So that is the selflessness of Radharani's love. Now that selflessness can manifest in different ways depending on the particular particular lila that is being performed. But there is no love that can come even close to Radharani's love. Her whole being is, how can I please Krishna? She aspires to fulfill all the desires of Krishna to her fullest capacity. And then as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu keeps speaking more and more, Ramananda keeps speaking more and more, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu keeps asking more and more. And at one point, Ramananda says, I had not thought that anyone could inquire anything beyond this. So Ramananda is also in ecstasy. Sometimes we may study very deep aspects of scripture, but those aspects are so deep that there is no appropriate audience to speak it. And if somebody is worthy enough to speak, some audience is already evolved enough, they are rasika enough. Vibhata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. If they are rasika and they want to become bhavuka, if they can relish the mellows and they want to rise to the highest bhava, then it's a great joy to have an audience like that. So Ramananda is delighted and he's astounded. He says, no one has inquired beyond this. And Ramananda Rai is ecstasy, keeps speaking, keeps speaking. And then at one point, Ramananda Rai starts speaking a song which describes the extremely intimate pastime of Lord Chaitanya, of Lord Krishna with Radharani. And when this extreme intimacy is being described, Lord Chaitanya puts his lips on Ramananda Rai. He puts his lips enough. So the idea is that when the Lord is performing intimate pastimes, that has to be respected. That is not to be publicized to everyone. That's why the mood is the Prabhupada also said the gopis pastimes, they have to be the Krishna's pastimes, the gopis, they are exalted pastimes, and they're not to be spoken to everyone because they can be easily misunderstood. They can be misunderstood to be mundane sexuality, whereas they are the topmost spirituality. So even Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Rai, when there is no possibility of misunderstanding because both of them are completely devoted, but there also they bring a stop, discuss no more. This is an indication for all of us that we discuss appropriate subjects. Sometimes we may speak a very exalted subject to somebody who is not at that level, and they may get confused. The exalted, or sometimes we may discuss a subject that may just be too overwhelming for somebody. But the purpose of discussion is actually to elevate others, and to speak. That's why we have to speak appropriately. Even Krishna in the Gita says that, especially the last part of the Gita, which is very confidential, Krishna's pouring out of the heart. Krishna is expressing his love. There, Krishna says that this has to be spoken confidentially. That don't speak this to everyone. Those who are not austere, those who don't have a devotional disposition, those who don't have a service attitude, don't speak to those. So the idea is not that it literally shouldn't be spoken, but the idea is that we need to be aware of what is the effect of what we are speaking. Is it going to elevate the person or is it going to agitate the person? Is it going to trigger attraction or is it going to trigger, say, envy? So we have to be cautious. So Lord Chaitanya silences Ramananda Rai over here. And then let's look at some big vignettes from their discussion, which indicate. Then there are short sutra-like discussions. So quick, it's like if we could say after this elaborate discussion, there is like a rapid fire quiz. So in rapid fire quiz, the question is short and specific, and the answer also has to be short. So this is also there. This mood of say short question, short answers. This is quite often there in our Vedic scriptures. We see in the Yaksha's conversation with Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata also something similar is there. So that this also there are more than a dozen items, around a dozen items, but I have chosen 3 to discuss over here. So what does he talk about over here? So the essence of devotion is a redefinition of values. The more our devotion increases, what happens? The more we realize that it is the Lord who is the supreme value for us. Nothing else matters except the Lord. So based on that devotional redefinition of values, let's look at some things. So he asks the question, what is the best education, that Mahaprabhu asks? And Ramananda Rai says the best education is devotion to Krishna. Now we may say, okay, education and devotion, okay, it's an interesting connection. So we may talk about it today. If you ask people what is the best education, they may say, okay, I want to go to an Ivy League university. That's the best education. Well, okay, let's try to understand this from a broader perspective. If we consider what is knowledge, in today's world, knowledge is equated with skills. Okay, somebody has done engineering, somebody has studied law, somebody has studied medicine. So we talk about knowledge in terms of skills, and that is the capacity to control the outer world, and that has its utility. Arjuna is an archer, and his archery knowledge is vital also for the service he is going to do to Krishna. But if you see in the not just in the Vedic context, but if you go back to a few hundred years ago, or definitely a few thousand years ago, even in the Western world, knowledge, Socrates, for example, talks about knowledge in terms of virtue. If we have knowledge, I want to see it in how you behave. So virtue refers to the capacity to control the inner world. So what is the best education? Not just that which provides us skills, but that which empowers us with virtues. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about 20 items of knowledge, and all of them are virtues. Because knowledge shouldn't just change what we do externally, it changes who we are internally. It changes our values. It instills virtues within us. And among virtues, there can be many virtues. Every virtue manifests our higher side. We have a lower side within us. We may be selfish, we may be manipulative, we may be short-sighted. But when virtues start manifest, when virtues become strong within us, then we don't become manipulative. We become more service-oriented. We don't become short-sighted. We become far-sighted. We become more selfless. So many virtues can manifest our higher side, but the only virtue that can take us to the highest reality. Many virtues can help us live better, contribute more in society. They can also take us to a higher destination, maybe heavens in our future life. But there's only one virtue that can take us to the highest destination, and that is the virtue of devotion. And so, in that sense, what is the purpose of education? What is the best education? That which will take us to the highest destination, that which will bring about the greatest transformation in our heart, that which will manifest the highest virtue, and that is devotion. So we may go to our universities to study even while we are having our jobs. We may do some parallel learning, because nowadays technology keeps changing. We have to keep learning. All that is useful, all that is valuable in its own way. But the most important education, if we want the highest of our life to be most meaningful and most rewarding, is our devotional education. So the opportunities that we get to hear about Krishna, that is the most important education. So that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is pleased with the answer. So as devotion also, as I means redefinition of values. So what is most auspicious for living entities? Mahaprabhu asks, and then the answer is the association of a devotee of Krishna. In one sense, Ramananda is speaking about his own fortune. He's got the association of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is himself, he's the Lord, but he's in the mood of a devotee. But now we may think there are many things auspicious. If I win a lottery ticket, that will be good. If, say, if in today's world, you could say an effective vaccine or a cure for COVID is described, that will be auspicious. May say that, okay, if climate change is stopped, that will be auspicious. There could be many things which are auspicious. But ultimately, why is the association of a devotee considered auspicious? Because for anything to have an auspicious result, it is the inner heart has to be transformed. The auspiciousness has to come in the heart in terms of transformation of desires. We might get a cure for COVID or vaccine, effective vaccine, or even a cure for COVID, but that might only start political and economic wars with somebody trying to exploit everybody else based on the cure that they have. So unless we might find some means to remove climate change problems, but if there is no consciousness change to accompany climate change, again we will do something else to pollute the environment in some other way. So what does the association of devotees do? To understand this, we need to understand how desires work. We usually think of desires as linear. Let's say the person is here, the object, the desirable object is there, and I desire that object. So that is the normal way desires work. We may be passing by a shop, and it might have a new version of a smartphone being displayed in its windows. Oh, I want to buy that. So, or we might see something on our phones or laptops, some advertisement. So we see a person and we see a desirable object. However, desires often are triangular. They're not just linear. There's a person, there's a desirable object, and there is a person savoring, relishing, enjoying, displaying that desirable object. So most companies, when they want to advertise products, they don't just show the product; they show the product endorsed by certain celebrities. In fact, sports players, say for example in India, cricketers, they don't earn so much through their sports play as they earn through the if they become superstars, they earn through endorsements. Why is the idea if a top sports player, top cricketer is saying, I use this phone? Oh, then people think, oh, that person is using, let me also use. So our desires are also triangular, not just linear. And this is especially true for spiritual desires. Why? Especially true for spiritual desires? Because in the case of spiritually desirable objects, they may not look especially attractive. If depending on what our particular interest is, material objects, they just look very attractive, whether it is a latest lifestyle product or whether it is another kind of sense object, it looks attractive. But how many of us, we look at a Bhagavad Gita or we look at Chaitanya-Ramananda and think, oh, this is so attractive, I want to read it. That doesn't happen so often. So the spiritually desirable objects may not catch our attention simply by looking at them. So the contact with them may not create that desire. However, if whether it is Bhagavad Gita or Chaitanya-Charitamrita, if we meet some devotee who is relishing this, they come up with fresh insights based on that book. They get so much joy in talking about it. They are animated with love in discussing that. Then we think, what is there in this book? I want to know about it. Maybe they're finding so much, I'll find something over here. So quite often, when we associate with someone who has devotional desires, that infuses us with devotional desires. So ultimate desirable object is Krishna. And when we associate with those who love Krishna, the love for Krishna, or at least the desire to love Krishna, starts becoming activated in our hearts. And that is how, actually speaking, we all become spiritually inspired. So for us, the biggest transformation is, earlier I talked about transformation of values. That's true. Along with that, we want to transform our desires. As presently, we may, if we have basic philosophical understanding, we may value bhakti, we may value devotion, but still our desires are not yet transformed. We may value as devotion is very important. I want to chant properly. I want to study scriptures, but so many other desires come up. So desire transformation of values is more at an intellectual level. Transformations of desires is more at the level of the mind or the heart, depending on what kind of desires are there. So this transformation happens by the association of devotees. And that's why association of devotees now is not just a physical thing. Oh, I came to a temple and associated. No, how much did I get the desires of those devotees? That desire of that transfer of desire is the essence of association. So association of devotees is most auspicious because the association enriches us. It transfers into our heart the desire that will bring the greatest auspiciousness, the desire to love Krishna. Then one more thing we'll discuss in this. What is the greatest unhappiness? Now we may think, oh, if I lose my job, if my relationship breaks down, or if I get some terrible crippling disease, and yes, all these can be terrible, and they are troubling. But here he says, to not have the association of Krishna's devotees is the greatest unhappiness. Now, why is that? What is the meaning of this? Let's try to understand it from many perspectives we could take it. It's that in the association of devotees, we experience Krishna. Yatra gayanti mad bhaktaha tatra tishtami narada. Naham vasami vaikunte yoginam hridayeshu va. Yatra gayanti mad bhakta tatra tishtami narada. So wherever there is Krishna, so Krishna says, I'm not present in Vaikuntha, I'm not present in the heart of the yogis. I am present wherever devotees are glorifying me. Now, this is an example of scriptural statement which cannot be taken literally. It is rhetorical for emphasis. Krishna is present in Vaikuntha. Krishna is present in the hearts of the yogis. But he is not accessible for us there. How can we go to Vaikuntha? How do we peer into the hearts of the yogis? But we can experience Krishna's presence in the association of devotees who are glorifying Krishna. So, yatra gayanti mad bhaktaha, where devotees speak about him, sing about him, we all can experience Krishna. And once we experience Krishna, that is such a relishable experience. There is so much fulfillment and enrichment in that a devotee feels. There is nothing comparable with this. Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha. Having attained this, there is nothing else to be attained. Or yad rasamrit, that was the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam says the same thing. Yad rasamrit truptasya nanyatra syadrati kvachit. Once we get this taste, there is no other taste that will attract a person. So the point is, in the association of devotees, when we experience Krishna, when we experience the highest happiness, and then that association goes away, and then I cannot experience that same higher happiness, and I cannot experience Krishna, and that is the greatest unhappiness for a devotee. Now we may say, can't we by our own devotion experience Krishna? Well, yes and no. Let's understand this. Yes, we all can, whatever situation we are in, we can try to remember Krishna. And if we can focus our mind and heart on Krishna, we can experience him, no doubt. But there are limitations. So how it is? This is based on Bhagavad Gita 10:9. Macchitta madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. What happens over here is that Krishna says that when those who are devoted to me come together, they relish discussing about me and they relish enlightening each other about me. So what happens is, see, Krishna is unlimited. We relish him from a particular perspective. And another devotee relishes Krishna from another perspective. Now there may be similarities, but there will also, because we are all individuals, there will also be differences. And when we discuss with other devotees, what happens is we appreciate how they are appreciating Krishna. And they appreciate how we are appreciating Krishna. And there is no joy like that. Oh, I didn't think about that point. Yeah, I never perceived it that way. So that's how it's one thing to know Krishna and to become absorbed in remembering Krishna. It's quite another to learn newer and newer facets of Krishna. To hear the same verse, but explained from a different perspective. Oh, I never thought like that. So that's why, in association of devotees, we could say our relationship with Krishna expands and deepens. Our appreciation for Krishna, it intensifies. So that's why this is bodhayantaha parasparam. We're mutually enriched. So individual remembrance of Krishna is wonderful, and we all need to cultivate that. The same verse also says, Macchittaha madgataha pranaha. We remember Krishna. Prabhupada translates it over there as not just the devotees think of me. He says the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. In 10.9 he says. So that means dwell in me means Krishna is the home for the thoughts of the pure devotees, for the mind, for the heart. Their thoughts may go to various places, but as soon as there is an opportunity, it comes back to Krishna. Just like we may go to various places, but as soon as the work is done, come back home. So we should think about Krishna constantly. We try to cultivate our personal relationship with Krishna, but simultaneously, when we associate with others, there's a special flavor which comes as our appreciation for Krishna expands. And this brings us to a paradox over here, that Krishna uses the word bodhayantaha. Bodhayanta means to enlighten. And this is 10.9, and 10.8 he has already said that they're Buddha, they're enlightened. The word Buddha, aham sarvasya prabho mattah sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam Buddha bhava samanvitah Buddha. So Buddha is cognate. It comes from the same root as Buddha. Buddha means not just the head of a particular religious tradition, but Buddha generically means the enlightened one. So they are already enlightened because they know Krishna. And how can the enlightened enlighten each other? That is because Krishna is unlimited. Now God outgrows every frame we use to see him. So we may analyze Krishna from a particular perspective, and it's wonderful to use that perspective to understand Krishna. But then we understand that actually Krishna is bigger than this perspective. So we may follow a particular religious path and we come to know Krishna by that, and that's wonderful. But we understand Krishna is bigger than any religion. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that God is not the monopoly of any religion. God is the universal heritage for all of humanity. So religion is meant for God. God is not meant for religion. The point is that no matter how much we know Krishna, there's always so much more to know about Krishna. In this way, the enlightened keep enlightening each other. So these are just a few glimpses of the content of the conversation that happened between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Rai. So now we move to the last two parts, this relatively small parts. We'll discuss what are the consequences of this conversation. And then lastly, what is the relevance? So what are the consequences? First, as the conversation went forward, Lord Chaitanya gave Ramananda. I was so pleased with him that he gave him darshan. He gave darshan of the Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifested as a divine couple, Radha and Krishna. So the very subject that Ramananda Rai was talking about, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed that he was, we could say, the subject. He was the object of that subject. Subject is the topic that we are discussing. And what are they discussing about? They were discussing about Krishna, Radha Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him darshan. That indicate how pleased Lord Chaitanya was with him. So that was the immediate consequence. But there was a bigger consequence also. We see that from this point onwards, Lord Chaitanya starts manifesting more and more of the Radha Bhav. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. He's Radha and Krishna. Till this point, till the 8th chapter in the Madhya Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is largely in the mood of Krishna, who is doing prachar. He's the mood of Krishna establishing the Yuga Dharma. But from the time he associates with Ramananda Rai, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is both Radha Krishna. As Krishna, he establishes Dharma. As Radharani, he just relishes Krishna, relishes the love of the divine couple. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts relishing this more and more. The Radha Bhav within Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts manifesting more and more. It's there before, but it's more of devotion to Krishna, not specifically Radha Bhav. This is of course elaborate subject, but so there is an immediate transformation, there is immediate consequence, and there is a long-term consequence. Same way for Ramananda Rai. When he's himself ecstatic speaking about his exalted subjects, but when he sees he has the darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the divine couple, he just loses consciousness, he faints, and after some time he comes back to consciousness and he offers profuse prayers, glorifying Lord Chaitanya and thanking him for the great fortune he's been bestowed. And then Lord Chaitanya says, actually, I want more of this fortune. I want to discuss more with you. And you come with me and stay with me in Jagannath Puri. And Ramananda Rai, he's so ecstatic. He says, yes, I'll do it. Ramananda Rai has a huge responsible position. He has enormous wealth. And giving it up, you can't do something like that without the sanction of the king. Now, sometimes somebody may have a very wealthy job and they just give up the job. They're also normally have to do some kind of KT knowledge transfer before you go. But at least in a company, in a democracy, we can give up the job whenever we want. But in a monarchy, if a person suddenly gives up the job, the king will get into trouble. The king may get angry. And that can get the person into trouble also. We see the difference that when Rupa and Sanatana Goswami wanted to give up their jobs, Rupa Goswami was able to give up. But Sanatana Goswami, when he tried to give it up, the employer in that case was a tyrannical king. And Nawab Hussain Shah, and he imprisoned he imprisoned Sanatana Goswami. So it was a risky thing to do for him. So he gave up the world. Ramananda Rai, he was so attracted to Lord Chaitanya's association, he gave up the world. But what happened? He gave up the world for the Lord's sake. He got the Lord and he also got the world. In the sense that Prataprudra, his king, was also devoted. And he was so pleased that you had the opportunity to serve Lord Chaitanya. He says, I will provide you for all your material needs. You will not have any lacking. You will not lack anything at all. And in this way, he was not a loser. He was enriched spiritually and he was also enriched materially. That's of course exceptional, but that indicates that the principle that when we renounce for the Lord's sake, we will be enriched. And then last part, we'll see what is the relevance for all of us. Now, the whole point is this is such an exalted conversation. If we go into the specifics, we'll find that there is nothing as deep and as exalted in any world literature. Many world literatures talk about love of God. On the spiritual path, there is a universal aspect and there's a confidential aspect. The universal aspect is that We all appreciate that love of God is the highest value that is being taught in various traditions. And Srila Prabhupada even said, when some Christians approached him and asked him, what do you think about Jesus? He said that he's our guru. And I was surprised. How? It's because he had so much love for God that he was ready to lay down his life for the sake of God. So if somebody has so much love, we bow down to him, we worship him, we treat him as our guru. So Prabhupada was very inclusive in that sense, that he said that we can appreciate love of God wherever it is there. That's the universal aspect. But simultaneously, there's a confidential aspect. While love of God is talked about in many of the world's great theistic traditions, but the levels of love of God, the lovability of God, and the loving dealings between the Lord and his topmost devotees, all these are revealed especially in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And this is a treasure that we need to treasure. So, not in the sense of superiority and pride, my religion is better than your religion. Not in that sense, or my tradition is superior to yours, but in the sense of deep gratitude. We did not do anything to deserve this. We just got it. So at the fortune that we have got, we are deeply grateful. This highest revelation has been given to us. And then that the eagerness to savor it and to share it. That we relish this supreme gift of the highest love, and we try to share it with others. So Lord Chaitanya had both these moods. He was savoring love for Krishna, and he was also sharing love for Krishna. And that is the mission of all the followers of Lord Chaitanya. We savor the love for Krishna through our personal devotional practices. We do them very intense, very seriously, that we savor that love for Krishna, and then we share it with others through our outreach activities. And that is the way we can treasure the treasure with which we have been bestowed in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition through exalted conversations like this, Chaitanya-Ramananda Samvada. So I'll quickly summarize. Today we discussed about the Chaitanya-Ramananda Samvada in broadly 4 parts. First, I talked about the context. It is the unlikeliest of conversations, because from a cultural and economic perspective, it is unlikely that the two would hug each other and talk to each other. From a cultural perspective, Ramananda Rai was a Shudra, and he was a Grahastha. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a sannyasi and a Brahmana. On the other hand, he was a wealthy person. A wealthy person might respect a sannyasi from a distance, but hugging and talking intimately, that's the context is it's remarkable. We show how devotion goes beyond all conceptions and conventions that we might normally have. Then we talk about the content, how from the level of dutifulness in an ordinary sense to the highest level of pure love for the divine couple, that the conversation goes over various hierarchies. And then I talk specifically within that about Radharani's love as being described the most selfless and therefore the most exalted, and the devotion as transformation of values, redefinition of values. We talk about 3 things. The highest education is that which imparts within us the highest virtue, that is love for Krishna. The most auspicious thing is that which brings about the most auspicious transformation in our heart, enriches us with the most auspicious desire to love Krishna, and that is association of devotees. And the greatest unhappiness is that which strips us of the source of the highest happiness. And the source of the highest happiness is the association in which we can, association of devotees, whereby we can learn more and more about our beloved, our all attractive Lord. And then lastly, we talked about the consequence was Lord Chaitanya revealed his divya form of the divine couple, and we talk about the consequences. And relevance is not that we become proud, but we become grateful and we savor and we share. Thank you very much. Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai. Do we have time for questions or comments?
Yes, Prabhu, we do have. Anybody who has a question, please unmute yourself and ask a question, please.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya-Ramananda Prabhu. This is Paramarupa Das. Please
Hare
accept my
Krishna.
obeisance. Always to Srila Prabhupada. Very beautiful deliberation on this exalted topic. One of my personal favorites as well. I have actually two questions. Maybe I will just ask one. If there is time, then I'll ask the second one. The first question is on the description of the hierarchy, the third level, where the Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamikam Sharanam Vrajam. So the emphasis you placed on was the renunciation of duty, and one may not do it with proper realization, because of which it is placed at that level. And if we take that whole verse in its entirety, then the notion of Keval Bhakti can be understood even from that verse, because it is the Sarvadharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja is also there together with that. So if it is done with proper realization, then that verse can communicate the fifth level, which is the Keval Bhakti. So I want to hear from you how that is identified as external on the basis of probably improper understanding of that verse or improper application of this verse.
Okay, good point. So when we say that verse, Sarvadharman Parityajya, that is the culmination of the Bhagavad Gita, and that is actually at the level of Kevala Bhakti, because it's talking about Mamekam Sharanam Vraja also. So, so why is that verse not considered to be the highest level? Yes, I also had that question, and I haven't yet found an answer, which is we could say which is absolutely conclusive. But there are some thoughts I had. As I mentioned, one thought is that if we consider within the hierarchy, the verse that is the verse is quoted for a particular purpose. So within the hierarchy, how it's going is we do your duty, we infuse our duty with some amount of devotion, but then we realize that actually in the world there is still entanglement. So what do? We renounce the world, and then we realize the Brahman, and then we realize beyond the Brahman is Bhagavan, and then we realize that that Bhagavan can be accessed. I don't have to renounce the world for accessing the Bhagavan. So that's why we have sthane siddha shuddhikatam tanuvan manobhir. That wherever you are, just hear about Krishna. The important thing to access Krishna is not to renounce is not to simply to do our duty or to renounce the duty. It is not to be in the world or to be out of the world. It is to be connected in the association of devotees through hearing. So we can say that that verse is quoted in a particular context. And in that context, renunciation is what is stressed in the flow of the thought. That Sarvadharman Parityajya is more stressed than Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. And that's why that verse is placed over there. Now, if we consider verses in general, each verse can have multiple points within it. So, for example, we had Atmaram verse, Atmaramascha Munayo, that verse from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explained in many, many different ways. And the idea is that one verse can have many, many different applications based on different contexts. So when someone quotes a verse, in what context they're quoting it is very important. So for example, I mentioned about this triangular desires. Now, is there a scriptural reference for that? I'm sometimes asked when I speak this. Now, it's a common sense point, but one scriptural reference I found in Prabhupada's works itself is Prabhupada quotes Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha. Now, and he says in association desires develop. Now, if you look at the verse in the original context, that is 262, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa, Sangasteshu Pajayate, Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha. So there actually Sangha doesn't refer to, it is referring to attachment. When we are attached to something, when we contemplate something, desire develops. We associate with, contemplate. We associate with something by contemplating on it. Then desire develops. So what Prabhupada does is, he decontextualizes that verse. In the context of that verse, Prabhupada is, in the context of that verse, it is more of mental association with sense objects through contemplation. But Prabhupada decontextualizes that verse and he says that sangat sanjayate kama. In association, desires develop. So sometimes some verses may make a particular point in the context of their overall flow. Sometimes the verses may make some other point in the outside that context. So if we consider Prabhupada would quote for offering food to Krishna, he would quote the verse Yagyashishta Ashina Santam Uchante Sarvakil Bishai. Now that's a valid application of that verse. However, look at the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is talking about yajna in terms of the fire sacrifices that are done so that there can be harmony between various levels of the universe. So Krishna is not exactly talking about doing a puja to offer food to Krishna. So now, but Prabhupada is using that verse. That verse can have a particular wisdom within the context. It can have different kind of wisdom outside the context. The principle is still applicable. So same way, when we are say placing a verse in a different context. See, in the original context of the text, the verse has a certain meaning. When we place that verse in another context, now sometimes that may misrepresent the verse completely. And that's why sometimes we may have some Prabhupada quotes which seem to be very provocative in terms of today's values of political correctness or something. But if we see Prabhupada, so that's a misunderstanding or misapplication of those verses completely. But in some ways, you could say that scriptural verses are like Lego toys, or Lego toy pieces. So within the scripture, those verses are put in particular arrangement to convey a particular meaning. But we could take that one verse or even one line from a verse, and that's like a Lego toy piece, and we place it in another framework, and another toy is formed over there. So now, whether that usage is valid or invalid, that has to be seen carefully. Now, what is the meaning that is being constructed here? What was the meaning over there? And that requires careful thought. But that's one reason why scripture verses are so versatile, that when we say Nava Rasa Dhamanya, there's newer and newer rasa, because one reason why there's newer and newer rasa is that we can approach scripture from different contexts. If we read the Chaitanya-Ramananda 5 years ago and now we read it again, we will relish it in a much different way. Why? Because the context of who is reading it has changed. Now we just by the passage of time itself we change, and if the passage of time is accompanied with the practice of sadhana, then definitely there's a change in our consciousness. Then we read it, the same book again, we'll find there's so much more to relish over here. So we could say that when we come to scripture from a different context, we realize different points of the scripture. Now, some people come with ulterior motive to misinterpret scripture or to put scripture, to read scripture according to their agenda, and that can lead to problems. So we have to be careful. So I would say there is quoting verses in the original context, quoting verses in a different context, and quoting verses completely out of context or opposite to the original context. So there are 3 different things: in the original context, then outside the original context, but still while fulfilling the purpose of the scriptures, and then quoting them so out of context that we defeat the purpose of the scripture. So this particular quoting of the verse is in the second level. So in the original context, it is talking about Kevala Bhakti, but in the context of this conversation, a part of that verse has been quoted to highlight the principle that just renunciation of duty alone is not enough. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think your answer is very satisfying.
Happy to be of service, Prabhu. Thoughtful question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Prabhu, thank you for the class. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, I really have deep gratitude for my good fortune to have been exposed to this tradition. But so in that context, I'm trying to understand some of the things that you said in the class. One was about intellectual transformation through transformation of values, and then mind and heart transformation through transformation of desires. Now I'm extrapolating from there. Is there a physical transformation too, Prabhu? And and how important that is. And, in terms of our cleanliness of our habits and, of course, I know the 4 regulative principles and all that, but in terms of, even attire and, wearing chandan and, wearing a dhoti. And then, now my other question, second part of the question is, can this be done in any order, or is there an order, or, how does this happen, Prabhu?
Okay. See, so is there an external transformation also along with the, say, the transformation at the level of the intelligence and the mind and the heart? This is a delicate question, and let's focus first on the principle, and then we'll go to the specifics. The principle is yena kena prakarena manah Krishna niveshayet. Somehow or the other, remember Krishna. That is the key principle. Now, having said that as the key principle, now how do we go about remembering Krishna? So each one of us is an individual in our own right, and we all have to, because we all come from particular backgrounds, we all have particular inspirations, particular inclinations. So there is a certain level of individuality in how we can best remember Krishna. So niyamagraha is one of the dangers on the path of bhakti, where what happens is either we reject the rules because we consider them external, or we insist on the rules so much that we forget the principle. So we reject the rules because we consider them unimportant, or we just neglect them completely. We either neglect them completely or we insist on the letter while forgetting the spirit. So let me explain this with a slide. So this is when we are trying to practice Krishna Bhakti or share Krishna Bhakti with others. The tradition is what comes from the past. And then that tradition is coming from the past, and the central circle is the living tradition. It is the expression of the tradition as it exists now. It exists slightly above the contemporary world, but it has to be linked with the contemporary world. It cannot be so above at the contemporary world. So the bottom circle is the contemporary world. So now the tradition needs to be linked with the living tradition needs to be linked with the past. That is done through fidelity, through faithfulness. And the living tradition needs to be linked with the present, with the current world. And that has to be done through flexibility. So flexibility means, for example, when Prabhupada came to America, he always said that I have not changed one thing. I'm just like a postman delivering the message. Prabhupada insisted on his fidelity, and not as insisted, he was faithful, no doubt. But at the same time, Prabhupada was flexible. The very first center which he built, which he started with the 22nd Avenue, and that 22nd Avenue, what was it about? It was simply a storefront converted into a temple. He wanted some people from India to sponsor him, and they were ready to sponsor, but they said we want to build a traditional temple. Prabhupada said, Indian government will not allow that much foreign exchange to come. He says, no, if you're not building a traditional temple, we're not interested. So they lost the opportunity. Prabhupada converted a storefront into a temple, and that did not follow the traditional architectural rules. But that center actually fulfilled the purpose of a temple far more than what traditionally conforming architectural temples might have performed, because they glorified Krishna, attracted people to Krishna. So Prabhupada was flexible also. So the point here is fidelity connects us with the tradition, flexibility connects us with the contemporary world. And a living tradition has to have both. So what happens is that in every tradition, there are conservatives and there are liberals. So the conservatives are primarily concerned about fidelity. This is how it was done in the past, and this is how we should continue doing it. And the liberals are concerned about their flexibility. This is where people are at, and we need to reach out to them. If we don't reach out to them, what is the use of doing things? So if we are only having fidelity without flexibility, then what happens is the tradition becomes too disconnected from the world, then it just becomes like a museum exhibit. That means, oh, this is how people were living in the past. This is how they were practicing Krishna Bhakti. But today nobody's practicing it. There's one devotee recently, he's writing a paper, he said probably by 2050, the way our movement is going, we will write, by 2050, we'll write the obituary of the last Western devotee in our movement. ISKCON will become a completely Indian movement. Because the way we are going, we are not able to attract any Western people. So do we want that? So in the Western world, we'll just become, once it was a multicultural movement, now it has become an Indian movement. So fidelity without flexibility will make us a museum exhibit. So that is the danger of being too conservative. On the other hand, if you're too liberal, if there is flexibility without fidelity, then we'll just become another part of the material world. We'll just become consumed by the contemporary culture. We'll become a fashion trend. So we need to have both fidelity and flexibility. That's what keeps it living and keeps it a tradition. So now coming to a specific question about externals, say whether it is wearing a particular dress, wearing a particular tilak, wearing a particular, say, kantimala. Now, how important are each one of these? First thing is definitely they're not unimportant. They're not unimportant. The externals can help us to also develop the internals. At the same time, just because the externals help us to develop the internals, does that mean necessarily that those same externals will help everyone to develop the internals? That is something which is a different question. So if we see within the history of our tradition also, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers went to Manipur, and Manipur was probably one of the few states in India which was actually almost entirely Vaishnava state. There was Vaishnava Bhakti all over the world, all over the country in India, but so prominent was only in that state. So now what happened is, so for generations, there are Manipuri devotees who were following the Lord Chaitanya. They were worshipping, they were doing Gaudiya Vaishnavism. They're practicing Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And then our movement went there and we started a center. And our movement's devotees, they started telling these people who had been born multiple generations, they were Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that, if you don't wear dhoti kurta like this, if you don't put tilak like this, if you don't wear kantimala like this, if you don't do like this, then you are not actually a devotee. Well, you might have been a devotee for 10, 15 years, and they have been devotees for multiple generations. So we needn't be so presumptuous. So the point is that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers went to Manipur and they preached in Manipur, they didn't expect the Manipuri devotees to give up their dress, their way of living just to practice bhakti. Now, when you talk about way of living, there are many things within it. There are some aspects of the culture which are anti-devotional, some aspects of culture which are non-devotional, some aspects of culture which may be pro-devotional. So those which are anti-devotional, they need to be given up. So we know the Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj was from Manipur, and he actually had this Manipuri kirtans, Manipuri performances which would happen. And they added to the richness of Bhakti culture. Many of the festivals in Mayapur and other places, he had them go all over the world and perform Manipuri dance. It was a Manipuri devotional dance. If they had given up their Manipuri culture and simply adopted the Bengali way of dancing and doing kirtans, which we normally do in ISKCON, then that aspect of the culture would not be an added attraction. So the point is, cultural diversity is very much included in Bhakti. Now, where does diversity lead to discord? Where does diversity lead to disconnection? That has to be carefully understood. So the principle I'll give in conclusion is that the key thing is the internal transformation. And there has to be the appropriate externals that foster the internal transformation. So now what will be the appropriate externals? That may vary according to culture. So every somewhat spiritual tradition, they will encourage modest dressing, for example. Now, what might be modest dressing in the West might be different from what is modest dressing in India. When the Britishers came to India, at that time there was something called the Victorian age. And if you study the history of Britain, Victorian morality is often quite lampooned. Those people are so puritanical. So when the Victorian people came to India, they wrote books about India. And one of the themes that comes so common is that these Indian women have no sense of chastity, purity, morality. He says, what? You may say. He says that they wear dresses which expose their midriff to everyone. They wear dresses in which their feet and their ankles can be seen by everyone. He says, this is obnoxious. Now we may say, is this the kettle calling the cat black? Well, in their culture at that time, for a woman to expose her legs was considered almost that if she is exposing her legs, that indicates that it's a come to me message. That's what was done by society girls. So now India is a hot country. Nobody wears footwear in terms of foot clothes. So it's not just women, it's not just men. Nobody wears that unless it's cold. So they were imposing their cultural standards on Indians, and they're saying, oh, these Indian women are so unchaste. And we Indians may look at Western women and they may wear particular dresses. We say, this is so unchaste. This is so impure. Well, even in the Western culture, there is modest dressing and there is immodest dressing. So rather than focusing on the particulars of the dress, we can look at the principle. The external should be such that they foster the internal. So the traditionalists, so if the conservatives say that these are the externals that have fostered internals and therefore everybody should follow this. Well, maybe not. The liberals will say, actually the externals don't matter. The internals only matter. Therefore, whatever externals are there, that's okay. Well, maybe not. Now, some externals may not foster the internals. Now, if somebody wears very revealing clothes, then they are even if they are not in bodily consciousness, they say, this is just the way I dress. It's not likely they are themselves going to be in bodily consciousness, and they are going to put others in bodily consciousness. So there are limits to how conservative we can be, and there are limits to how liberal we can be. So the externals need to be chosen in such a way that the internals are fostered. And for some people, continuing with the externals as they were in the tradition is the best way to foster the internals. For some people, doing some adjustments so that people they can focus their attention to the internals, that may be appropriate. Does it answer the question?
Yes, Prabhu. It did. So it was very clear for me. Thank you.
So, shall we stop here?
Okay, if anyone has any question, maybe this is last chance. Otherwise, we can wind up here. Okay. Okay, Prabhu. Thank you for such a wonderful, philosophical, and quite thoughtful class. Very educative class, Prabhu. We really relished the entire class, and this has set a trend now because, of course, going forward, I think whenever we have such interesting topics, especially with any tattva, we would request you that kindly enlighten us on those topics. Yes, however, I think we also understand that our time zones are different, but we do consider that in mind, and we may keep some extra buffer time so that devotees can have some question answers session, so that they can clarify the doubts and strengthen their philosophy. Okay, I think I take this opportunity once again, Prabhu, and on behalf of entire ISKCON Boston congregation, I deeply appreciate your association and your enlightening lecture on the Gaur-Lila, especially the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Ramananda Rai Samvada, which is very complex, but you have actually very beautifully analyzed and simplified it. Thank you, Prabhu. I really appreciate that. Once again, our deepest gratitude to you, Prabhu. Thank you for this wonderful services. Kindly.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve.
Yeah,
Hare Krishna.
kindly gratitude by loudly chanting Hari Bol once for His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. For those who want to stay in touch with Prabhu, there is thespiritual.com. Through that website, you can connect with him. And also Prabhu has one more site, which is an official website of him, Chaitanya-Charan.com. So please visit these websites. You can actually get more resources of Prabhu. And if anybody wants any of his books, so kindly let me know. I have some copies of all his books. I can share with you all. Okay. Thank you.
There are a couple of other websites, just a quick second. There is GitaDaily.com, where I write every day on a small 300-word reflection on the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes,
I've pasted that over there in the chat box. And there is another website I started a few months ago. It's called spiritualwordsdaily.com, where every day, if those who want to improve their vocabulary and their spirituality simultaneously, that's a website where I take one word of say a graduate or postgraduate level, and then I illustrate how to use it using 3 sentences, one based on the Ramayana, one based on the Mahabharata, and one based on the Bhagavad Gita. So that's Spiritual Words Daily. So Gita Daily and Spiritual Words Daily. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear Prabhu. Hari Bol. God Pramanande. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. So did you
Thank you, Prabhu.
for our sessions, for our forthcoming sessions, please stay tuned and kindly take a look at our website, and also on your chat groups. You will be updated regularly. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Dear devotees, I just have a couple of things, because I think since we had this session longer,